And then just
Hello. I'm Rolando Vela. First of all, thank you for being here. We have representation from surrounding cities. We have the school district, we have the county, we have TxDOT, we have irrigation districts, drainage districts, and the purpose of this meeting is for us to talk about what we're doing, what our entities are doing. Um, I was interviewed earlier and I was asked, well, why are you doing this? Well, we want to be proactive. We're 6 months away from hurricane season. Last year, we had a storm preparedness meeting during hurricane season. So we came up with the idea, well, let's start talking now. Let's share resources. What are we all doing? And and let me tell you, whether it's a school district, the county, irrigation district, TxDOT, we all have something in common. And it's important to note this. And that is that we live in an area that's flat. We are in a delta. And we're not the hill country, Austin, San Marcos, New Braunfels. We are flat. We are in a delta. And so the only way to move stormwater, any of these people will tell you, you got to dig open drains and you got to build detention ponds. Just to tell you, at the Drains District number 5, we're currently working with about $70 million of projects. And I would tell you 99% of those projects, widening channels, building detention ponds. We currently have 123 acres of detention ponds. Once we complete all these projects that we're doing with the City of Harlingen, and we're doing with grants and in-house, that total will increase to about 350 acres. And why is that important? Why are detention ponds important? The whole objective is to move stormwater. If we can store it temporarily in a pond, so when the water starts to recede in a channel, that water goes into the channel. So it's about managing peak flows. And what we're going to be discussing about is what we talk about days or hours before an event. We're all talking at all hours. And I felt that it was very important for us to kick off our first meeting by inviting Barry, and I apologize for bothering you for the past few weeks. I've been sending him emails because I thought it was important that Barry Goldsmith with the National Weather Service be here to give us a snapshot of what he's seeing in his radar with hurricane storms this year. And so we have him here. And before I forget, I want to tell you, on behalf of the Drainage District, we have a little gift for you. It's a cap. And so when you wear the cap, you can brag about number 5. And again, I have to tell you, I want to thank City of Harlingen for hosting this meeting. We at the Drainage District are working on various projects with Harlingen right now. And we are working with other communities as well. So we appreciate the support we have from Harlingen. We appreciate the the partnership. And before I turn it over to Barry, I want to acknowledge one of my board members, Jerry, staff here, and if I may, real quickly, in the interest of time, before I hand it over to Barry, I would like for people to introduce themselves. And by the way, as I turn the mic over, I want to tell you that the outline today is basically we want to discuss what projects we're all working on. It's important that we understand what are what we're all involved in and any collaborations, sharing of information. And so this is what we're going to be talking about and also preparing for the next, what can we do to better prepare and hopefully in the end schedule the next one. And so that said, before I turn over the mic to Barry, I'd like to have Oscar introduce himself and turn the mic over.
Good afternoon. Oscar Garcia, Assistant City Manager for the City of Harlingen.
Hi, good afternoon. Rolando Casas, Assistant TMC, Cameron County.
Tom Hushin, Emergency Management Coordinator, Cameron County.
Hello, everyone. Gilberto, I'm the Maintenance Supervisor with the Highway Department out of the San Benito office.
Good afternoon, everyone. Gabriel Villarreal, I'm the Assistant Air Engineer for TxDOT, the San Benito Area Office.
Hello, everyone. Jennifer Beltran with TxDOT.
Amanda McCutcheon, TxDOT.
Hello, everyone. Roberto Hernandez, City Engineer for Harlingen.
Hi, good afternoon. My name is Ruth Trevino, Assistant Public Works Director for City of Harlingen.
Brianna Woodman, Special Projects Director for CCDD 5.
Hello, Veronica Laraga, Assistant General Manager, Cameron County Drainage District 5.
Jerry Wade, Board Member, Cameron County Drainage District number 5.
Good afternoon, Al Martinez with the Irrigation District, GM.
Afternoon, Frank Rios, Junior City Manager, City of La Feria.
Alfonso Rodriguez, Public Works Director, La Feria.
Barry Goldsmith, National Weather Service, Rio Grande Valley Office, Warning Coordination Meteorologist.
And we have some people in the audience, if you want to introduce yourselves. I know we have school district, county, Dan, Carlos, Commissioner.
Raul Gomez from Cameron County, from Commissioner David Garza's office.
Hello, my name is Frank Morales. I'm a City Commissioner in Harlingen District number 4.
Who else wants to introduce?
Ben Escobar with Cameron County Drainage District number 3.
Who else?
Luis Vargas with Chaibe Consulting. We provide on-call engineering services for Cameron County Drainage District number 5.
Dan Serna with Cameron County. Happy New Year.
Carlos Sanchez, Public Works Director, Cameron County.
Good afternoon. I'm Danny Castillo with the Harlingen School District.
Anybody in front, you guys want to introduce? Anthony Cantu, Assistant County Engineer, Cameron County. Thank you for being here. You want to bring the mic over and
Hello, Vicente Rodriguez, City of Harlingen.
Danny Diaz, City of Harlingen.
Hello, Guillermo Rodriguez, Street Superintendent, City of Harlingen.
Hello, Scott Arnold, 360 Drone Mapping here at Harlingen. Kristen Lucky, candidate for Texas House District 37.
thank you. So Barry's about to tell us what he sees in his radar.
I'm going to stand up if y'all don't mind. The other mic, if that's usable, we can have some audience participation. I don't know what my time frame is. I've got about 20 minutes of presentation, but this could go up to 30 or 40 for some open conversation because it is a drainage district meeting, but there's a whole bunch of other people here. I see Ron Whitlock is here. I see some other media folks are here, and we've talked a lot. There'll be some interesting slides I'm going to put up that might be a little bit provocative, but they're important to talk about as we move forward in the discussion. which is going to be more than just about the forecast. That's only part of the issue that we have to deal with here in the Rio Grande Valley. And you're a pretty lucid audience. I think you'll get the first questions right when we start off here. So the four bigs, think about what four bigs are, and we'll then go over that soon after we get started here. In fact, right away. So before I move forward, disregard that picture, by the way. I just gave a talk similar to this morning to a group of faith-based leaders over in Weslaco. And it's really funny in my job. I mean, we have days when I'm in the office and there's not much going on. Last week after the holidays was pretty quiet. Today we got 5 meetings today. And I had some staffers go out to the Cameron County LEPC in Brownsville. We also had a Hospital Preparedness Coalition from CBRAC meeting today. And we have Senator Ted Cruz's office is coming into, staffers are coming into our office to watch us release the balloon. So all on a Wednesday, but next Wednesday, maybe not as busy. Anyhow, so without further ado, the four bigs. Anybody want to start guessing? And I don't know if we have another mic out there that's got the battery in it. The one I over here didn't. It's working now. Yeah, I was afraid to use it because the battery might die. But if anybody wants to raise a hand and talk about this. So there are four big weather and climate situations here that are persistent year after year in the Rio Grande Valley. And remember, I said weather and climate, so we can look at both of those things. I just talked to the pastors in Weslaco, and they got the answer in about 45 seconds, all of them. So let's see if y'all can match that. So anybody want to raise a hand and grab the mic and say what the number one big is, or one of the four bigs is? No, hurricanes is not a big. Hurricane produces some bigs. What are those bigs? Oh, I got some hands. Hand in the back. Let's get the mic back there. Flooding. Okay, yeah, that's it. So Kristen Lucky, flooding. Number one big. And everyone thinks it's number one anyway because of what happened last March, right? So yes, number one big. What's another one? Drought, absolutely. You're thinking about that now too, right? I consider that the third big, but these can all move around the rankings, right? Like the college football playoffs, Miami could win the championship out of number 10, right? So we move these rankings around. So yes, drought and what comes with that, water resource management, wildfire potential, and wildfire spread potential. Okay, 2 of the 4. Though that's actually one of the harder ones to get, the drought one. A lot of people don't get that. There's 2 more left. We got flood and drought. So the opposite ends of the spectrum. What else? Heat waves, number 4, or maybe not number 4, maybe it's number 1 sometimes. And what is the other one? Other one is pretty obvious too. Wind, I heard the word wind, yes, wind. Those are your 4 bigs, so let's go through them. Again, we'll be discussing this and as well as the outlook and a hurricane season teaser, so we'll zip on by that. So they are. That was last March in McAllen. We all remember. It was even worse right here where we're sitting in Harlingen. And I think Rio Hondo may have had it worse still than even we did here in Harlingen. Windstorm, we've seen these pictures before, and we'll talk a lot about that too as how do we fix that issue. That's a colonia north of Weslaco Donna back in 2015. Drought water issues, we've seen this a bit too. All or nothing, right? They say Texas is a state of perpetual drought broken by the occasional devastating flood. March 2025. And thanks to some of our emergency management partners who will be joining me in Fort Worth at the state conference, hopefully approved, to talk about that. And that last one you can't really read very well. Let's see the big screen, but the red means heat. So you see some red colors. Those are actually record temperatures for the summer of 2023 in a place that's already hot. So those are your 4 bigs. I like to use Bob Dylan's quote here. It doesn't take a weatherman to know which way the wind blows, and change the words here to say it doesn't take a hurricane to know which way the water flows. You know, the first answer I got for a big from the audience was a hurricane. But a hurricane itself isn't the big. It's what the hurricane produces that's the big. And why is that important? Because $500 million in property and agricultural damage since 2018, at least $500 million, has been caused by flooding rain. Now, shown on the pictures there, you have the 2018 event, which many of us remember, especially over in Weslaco, but all the way here in Harlingen too. Rainfall totals for that event were greater than Hurricane Beulah, by the way, in many locations. And then if you go down to the one below it, that was almost exactly a year later, in almost the exact same location, some of the worst rainfall fell on June 25th, 2019. Upper right is a hurricane-related event. That was Hurricane Hannah in 2020. Also, this was in July, which is kind of an interesting month for hurricanes here. And then the bottom right is what happened last March. You can see that purple and dark purple shading right over where we're sitting with some of the heaviest rainfall, historic rainfall, not only for March, but even for an annual event. So these events were 1 in 100 plus return frequency events in Western Cameron and Eastern Hidalgo County. Now, I'm going to give you a education tip for you to say when you go out and talk to your public. Do not use the term 100-year flood, please, because we've had 5 of them since 2018. And that gives the public a false sense of security. Well, we just had our 100-year flood, so I don't need insurance. I don't need to be resilient. It won't happen again until my grandkids are my age. No, not necessarily. Even as we improve how we measure and rate and rank flood events, 100 is 1 in 100 chance, or 1% chance in any given year that you could get the devastating flood. And then drainage improvement projects. We just heard about that to start. We'll talk much more about that, I'm sure, today and in the future. And we'll get into some details as to how we can mitigate against the 4 big. So let's keep going. So how's your flood risk, Harlingen? Believe it or not, Cameron County is mapped by FEMA, what's called the FIRM, Flood Insurance Rate Map. But it's only mapped near flood control projects over here. If you look at the city of Harlingen there, notice there's no blues and reds, which means FEMA hasn't mapped it. And note, this map was last updated in June of 2018, before we had the urban flood. So that's an issue, right? We still don't know exactly what our ratings are, but we'll get to that discussion with y'all involved in the discussion as well. But there are other ways to help determine your flood risk down to the street level. This is a group called First Street, and First Street actually looks at risk for the 4 bigs, believe it or not, and other bigs too. And you can take a picture of that, or I don't have a QR code, unfortunately, but you can plug in your address or your street, and you can get an idea of flood risk values here in Harlingen, in Weslaco, in Santa Rosa, in Rio Hondo, down in Brownsville, what have you. And the one below that is an interesting thing being done by a doctor student, a PhD candidate, who's now working at UTRGV from the University of Arizona. His name is Lucas Belluri. And what Lucas is doing is combining satellite data from the floods since 2018, all the ones that we saw on that last earlier slide with the rainfall numbers, and looking at response from people that were impacted by it and folding it together to help improve what we know as flood risk. Now, one thing about flood risk is it's all determined by people's impact, which is also determined by the moving target of how good or bad our drainage is. And that moving target is crazily changing because of what? Agricultural land use changes, and more importantly, urban and suburban development, which is a nonstop deal. If we're not keeping caught up with it, our Atlas data that we're basing the 1 in 100, 1 in 500 may not be accurate even 2 or 3 years later after we've updated the Atlas. And by the way, there'll be a new Atlas called Atlas 14 coming out soon. I think it'll be Atlas 15, which will update the data. But again, it may be dated soon after it hits the press because of all the changes that go on. So we have to stay caught up. So again, how's your flood risk? Let's have some discussion here. Do you think you are safe from floodwaters? Let's discuss. What is you? You could be your residence, your business, your church, your building, your street. How many people think that they're safe from floodwaters? And what level of flooding? How much rain? In how short or long a period of time? It's all about rain and rainfall rate. Not just about rainfall, rate matters. We'll talk about that next. So think about that as we plug away here at the next couple of blurbs. So what if it rains 8 inches as we measure it in 2 hours? Now, 8 inches does not mean the height of my boot. It's not what 8 inches mean. It's an official NOAA rain gauge is how we say 8 inches. So if you have 8 inches of NOAA rain gauge value in 2 hours, show of hands or anybody wants to speak up. What do you think it'll look like in your neighborhood or where you work or where you drive?
Not good.
So not good, okay? Not good. What does not good mean, sir?
They won't be able to come into work. Streets will be possibly flooded.
Okay, so 8 inches in 2 hours, which street and how much water? Let's talk about water depth. 8 inches of rain in a gauge can equate to how much depth of water on that street? How much?
Enough to keep it, we've had 6, I believe, right, Alfonso? And we've had water locked in the streets, or they have to shut the streets.
Right. Typically, a street will be flooded out where vehicles get in trouble at over 2.5 or 3 feet. Get 2 feet, most high-profile vehicles are fine. General sedans and SUVs are fine. You get to 3 feet, they're in some trouble. And get to 4 feet, your highest profile vehicles can be in trouble, except the ones that are used by emergency management to rescue people. So 8 inches in 2 hours, for example, if it's a poor drainage area that has not been fixed to be a better measure of the probability. Remember we said 1 in 100? How many, you've all heard of 100-year flood, right? You've heard of the 1 in 100 annual return interval, or ARI. Hopefully some of you have heard about that. Okay, we build infrastructure to match one of those values. And those values can be 1 in 100, 1 in 250, 1 in 500, 1 in 1,000. Could be as low as 1 in 5. Let's hope not, but it could be. And what does that mean? 1 in 5 is a 20% chance in any given year that you will have a devastating flood in that area. 1 in 100 is a 1% chance that will happen in any given year. 1 in 500 is a 0.02% chance that could happen. 1 in 1,000 is a 0.1, not 0.2, 0.2 and 0.1, which is really small, infinitesimal. How many people think that City of Harlingen is built equivalently at a value that's reasonably good for general public safety? And that value, I would say, is 1 in 100. That's the value that shows you're spending enough money to reduce the worst of the impacts, but there's not enough money to spend to get all of the impacts. Where do you think Harlingen is? How many people know? You're all in the room. You're Drainage District 5. There's some city folks in here. What's our number? I'll tell you some history that we found in 2018 at a meeting like this. But what do you all think your number is? Is it uniform across the city? No. What do you think your worst number is? The highest probability number is? What do you think it is? Hopefully not 1 in 2. That's a 50% chance that in any given year, if the atmosphere wants to play in the devil's sandbox, that area is going to flood big time. Anyone think we have any 1 in 2s here, neighborhoods, streets?
I bet some of the old downtown is.
Think there's some 1 in 2s. What about 1 in 5s? 20%. A lot of those, she says. What about 1 in 10, 10% chance? Okay. 1 in 25. 1 in 50. How many think that the majority of probabilistic ratios for neighborhood, streets, houses are 1 in 100 or greater? How many think it's 1 in 100 or greater? I don't see anyone raising their hand. How about 1 in 100 or few or less than 1 in 100? Less. You think that's a problem? Yeah. Can we fix it? Yes. Are we planning to fix it? I don't know.
If I may say, I'm not an engineer, but as an engineer I work with, what happened in 2019 in Harlingen? 16 inches of rain in under 6 hours. And this engineer started telling me, well, so-and-so cubic yards. I don't understand that. He said Delta Lake fell in Harlingen. Delta Lake fell in Harlingen in 2019. And there was no drainage system that could have handled the amount of stormwater that came in within those 6 hours. I mean.
So the answer to that is there may be no drainage system to handle all of that. But if you base it on the Atlas 14 data, which we actually equate rainfall rate and rainfall total to what that probability is, you can engineer for it. And the question becomes, how much money are you able to spend or willing to spend to get to that happy medium? Here's why it matters, okay? Poor drainage area, rated at 1 in 5, okay? We get 8 inches in 2 hours in a 1 in 5, 20% probability. I will guarantee you the water depth in that poor drainage area will be around here. 3 feet, maybe 4. What does that mean for the first floor of the residences that may not be bermed up above the base flood elevation? What's going to happen to them? They're going to flood. Are sandbags going to help? That? I don't think so. Okay. So you're rated at 1 in 5, but what if you spend the appropriate funds to make it 1 in 100? Now how much water depth do you think there'll be for the same amount of rain? Think it'll still be this high? No. Think it might be down here? So there's still, yeah, 1.5 feet, right? But if you're below 1.5 feet, you're probably not getting into the home, which means you're reducing the footprint of the damage that would have to be covered by insurance, or worst case, a little bit of FEMA money if there's uninsured property damage. Can we do it? Should we do it? I think March 27, 28 tells us that we should do it. Reduce that footprint from here to here. Now, is it going to be perfect? No. If you get even higher rainfall amounts to 1 in 500ths, and it's a 1 in 100 type build out, you may still get to water levels like that. But 1 in 500, even with changing climate and additional latent heat of condensation producing all that rainfall rate, is still a very rare event. And it's generally a cost loss assessment that works out. But your cost loss is what you need to look at now. These 1 in 5 neighborhoods, they're getting crushed. And more frequently, as we saw, between June 2018 and March 2025. So 20 inches in 12 hours, when did that happen? Anybody know? When did that happen? I just threw that number up there for fun, but it actually happened when?
That's at 96 or 97?
19 or 18.
Nope. That it did in some areas, yes. But when most recently that happened? Right here in Harlingen. Last March. We think we had 20 to 21 inches on the southeast corner, south of the airport. That's what we estimated. We don't have a good measurement. We have a pretty good estimate there. And it was in roughly 12 hours. And we saw what happened. We saw Rio Hondo. We think the same numbers probably fell there. And we saw how bad their drainage was. Green Valley Farms, Green Valley Acres, I think was the name of the neighborhood. They were underwater for weeks. Not acceptable. Not acceptable. So how are you all equipped to flow this amount of water? If we get number 2 and number 3, number 1 didn't quite happen. I think we had 9 inches in 3 hours, so it was a little higher than that rainfall rate. But the other ones happened, roughly. The 16 and 8 was, we think, happened in the city between like 6 or 7 p.m. and 2 a.m. I think that was roughly the 16 and 8. So are we equipped to flow this amount of water? Can we make it better? I hope your answer is yes, we can make it better. It's not going to be perfect. Like,
I think we're all working towards that end. But I have to say, Mayor Sepulveda just arrived here, Commissioner Cavazos Gomez, Mayor Guerra from San Benito, and we got representation from Drainage District number 6 here with us. Thank you for being here. But we're working towards those areas, widening channels, building detention ponds. Those are efforts that we're doing right now every single day.
So the question I have for the engineers is, are we trying to attempt the 1 in 100 value?
So right now, most of the ditches, the way FEMA rates if you're in a flood zone or not, it's a 1 in 100. So if you're in a zone X or zone X shaded, the undeveloped land is protected, right? So what we're aiming is to our ditches, the Arroyo Colorado, the North Main drains, to ensure that they have the capacity for at least the 1 in 100. As we continue improving it, increasing it to 1 in 250, 1 to 500, basically making it wider, bigger, so water gets moved out to the Gulf. That's where everything drains out to.
And it's great news to hear. Like, that's what needs to be done so that you can see this result. And the problem sometimes is that we don't get the opportunity to see the result. It's a very rare event to have 20 inches of rain in March or any time. As I mentioned, Beulah wasn't even that much in that time frame. But Weslaco had it. So the Indian Hills, Las Brisas subdivision area, in 2019 and 2018 back to back, and then 2020 and 2021 with Hannah and next event there, they got similar values. And some of the projects that they worked on through the bond referenda, there were 2 of them, but the one in 18 was $200 million. And it made a difference. It wasn't perfect, but it definitely reduced the footprint of this much water, reduced it dramatically. So there is evidence, and you could talk to Raul Cecin over there at Hidalgo County Drainage District 1, if you all know him. Their group is part of that process, and it's made a difference. So it's great to hear you're doing the same here because you've had the same impacts. 2018 flood, 2019 flood, Hurricane Hannah, 2025, right? There's no reason not to be really stepping front foot forward to make that happen. So good, I'm glad to hear that because our job in the Weather Service, we issue things like flood warnings and extreme flood warnings known as flood emergencies and all that. We'd love to reduce the number we issue to 0, especially the emergencies. And that only happens when we improve the drainage capacity so that we don't have situations like we see on the frontage road, which we've now seen 2 or 3 times, I think, since 2018, where much of that frontage road has been under 3-4 feet of water. That's got to change. McAllen knows this too, by the way. They've got some really interesting setups by the convention center, which are not good. All right, moving on.
I have a question before you move on, and I think it'd be good for the, it's on, okay, for the community. Talking about the March 2025 rain event, we here in our community did not really have any notice that we were going to be seeing 20 to 22 inches of rain. And so I think the community were concerned because everybody was kind of going around and doing things in the community with no notice. Can you talk a little bit about how that comes to be able to provide adequate notice and when things cannot be planned for, and why that is? Because that was what I heard over and over. There was lots of events happening. I remember about 5 p.m. that evening. I think we were over at the Stewart Suites, and they were having an event, and everybody was just having a good time, and there was no rain in the forecast to that degree. So there was no planning efforts, and that puts a real strain on communities. Can you talk a little bit about that?
Yeah, so I was ready for this question. Thank you, Mayor. I knew this was coming. Okay. And actually, we have some information on our website about that event and related to the meteorology of it. And we'll be presenting, hopefully, at South Texas All Hazards Conference here on it. And I've got some Hidalgo County folks that are going to be joining me to discuss that and how we turned the ship quickly from what had been drought wildfire potential all the way around to the flood. So from the meteorological perspective, there's good and bad news. We'll start with the bad news first. The bad news is we're still not perfect and we're not always good at advanced notice for highly localized events like the one we saw on March 27th into the 28th. That's the bad news, and we still have work to do, and we know that we have work to do. But the good news is we have come a long way, baby, since 10, 20 years ago and getting closer and closer. And we have cases where he actually did pretty well going back to 2018. So my point is this, the forecast for that event, 2 days out, 2.5 days out, focused on the coastal bend, Corpus, Kingsville, Calallen, places like that. And it ended up being the valley. And so for the local residents like yourselves, it's a miss, it's a bust, big time, right? But from the meteorological perspective, I can tell you that 10, 20, 30 years ago, we might have outlined the whole state of Texas, or maybe Dallas-Fort Worth for the big area. And nobody south of there would have even had a thought in their mind about that kind of rain. We were only 80 to 100 miles off on this one. Point being that as we improve our modeling, as we use higher computational power, things like artificial intelligence and machine learning, it's going to get us there. There'll still be cases where we'll be off, but we'll be less and less off over time. We're seeing that with hurricane. Hurricane's a great example. Track forecasts are incredibly great now compared to what they were 30, 40 years ago. But a hurricane's a larger, longer lasting entity. This is much shorter fused. So we'll still have issues, we'll still have misses, but we're building a better capacity to get these events. And the fact that we weren't too far off, just 2-3 days out, is a good sign for the future. It doesn't help you now, though. We know that Corpus was preparing because they saw the whites of its eyes, and then it shifted 100 miles south and got us. Had it been the other way around, it would have been bad for them too. Had it been dead on, we would have had that 48 to 60, 72 hours a window to provide reasonable worst case scenarios to get all the folks like Tom's folks engaged and ready, because that's what we're doing now in the Weather Service. We're providing impact-based decision support to get people ready for public safety as far in advance as we can. And this one didn't work out because the nature of how small scale the meteorology was and how our models didn't resolve the 100-mile difference 2.5 days out. But as time wears on, we're going to get closer and closer. And we're already seeing some beneficial situations across the country where the events have hit. For example, the Hill Country flood's an interesting case, and the recent California floods are a good case. And the California fires last year are a really good case. We knew that coming a week out. There were red flag warnings and high danger information like 5 days before the Palisades fires, right? So with the flooding in California, we had several days of lead time this year. And the other event with the Hill Country, there's still a distance issue in days, but by the time we got to 2.5 days out, we were like, uh-oh, this could be bad. Exactly which river and how long and where, that's still tricky, but at least we had the idea of it. So that's going to start happening here more and more, but not every time. There'll still be cases where we might miss. Maybe we get it off by 50 miles, and maybe it hits the Open King Ranch, right? And that's the forecast area, and it gets to the valley. Uh-oh, still a miss, but a lot closer. And ultimately, we'll get more that nail us. And we have the reasonable worst-case scenario that there could be 20 inches of rain in the 16 hours, which says, uh-oh, that's really bad. And we know that 72 hours out. So we'll get there. I hope that helps answer the question.
Yes, I think, and I know that we're privy to that information, but for the community that it still has those concerns, I think it's important to understand that we've identified those issues and we know that they exist and that we're working towards, as you mentioned, to be able to improve and to provide adequate notice.
Right. The resilience, though, will help in all cases. So if we're off by 50 to 100 miles, but your 1 in 100 resilience is built, then you will have a flood. Because in some of these cases around the area were 1 in 250, 1 in 500, but instead of having this much water, which we had, you're down here, and that's a world of difference when it comes to response and recovery, especially recovery. All right. There's Flood Smart. If you don't have flood insurance, I don't know how many people here do. How many people have flood insurance? Good, about a third of you. I'd like to see it be more like 60 to 70% of you. It's not that expensive, although it has gone up over the years, I'll be honest. If you get it in November, please. Why should you get it in November? What's the best reason to get it in November?
End of the hurricane season.
End of the hurricane season, and what does that mean? It's a 1-year policy. What does that mean next May? You don't have to do anything. You set it and forget it because you pay it all at once. Set it, forget it. The season ends, dry season comes in. You're coming in before March and April because you never know. We saw last year. And you are good to go through March and April too. So November, even October, but definitely November. So we talked about this at infinitum, the annual return interval. This is my feeling, is that every inch of the LRGV should be rated at 1 in 100 at least. And again, reanalysis is constant. This is a moving target, including farmland. So that's the trick to flooding. Windstorm resilience is a little easier in a way. Flood resilience is hard because we have the changes always happening. So again, these are some examples of the projects at HCDD1 on the left, and then some examples of news articles about what needs to be done. The regional planning group, you may have heard about that formed up, I think, after March. This has been an ongoing discussion, and that's why flood is the number one big. We're having really good discussion here, right, over the course of maybe 15 minutes so far, of why flood resilience is huge, because it is the number one big. So let's move to number 2 big. Generally number 2 big, windstorm, more than hurricanes. Believe it or not, since are there any discussion points you want to go over on the flooding side? Because we still have drought and water resources next. Going once, going twice. I'll stick around for a little bit after, by the way, for that. So since 2010, only Hurricane Hannah has produced widespread tropical-related wind damage. Most of our wind events have come from thunderstorms, and here they are. March 29, 2012, wind-driven hail McAllen, $660 million of insured damage. Happened to hit some of the highest property value census tracts in the valley. and they got ravaged pretty hard by that. That same year, there was a near miss out there, 102 mile per hour gusts measured by a wind turbine that was being tested, and it was at 10 meters where we typically measure our wind in the Weather Service. Yikes, 102. Imagine if that had hit the populated area with the colonias. That's a problem. We did have colonial wind damage a few years later, North Weslaco, North Donna. And I got that highlighted because I was just speaking to Weslaco, so that's why it's red. 2016, Mission to Hidalgo City microburst destroyed their building, a $5 million property, blew in the sidewall, and wind has to go out. If it goes in, right, what goes in must go out. $4 million in damage, maybe $5 million, I think it was going to be used as a shelter. It had a nice gym in it and everything else. It just tore the thing up. And why? It did not have a wall-to-roof connection. Uh-oh. Big Bad Wolf huffed and he puffed and he blew the house in with 85 to 95 mile per hour wind. Category 1 edging on Category 2 gusts. Destructive wind in northeast Hidalgo. That was the same day we had the flooding. In 2019, there was also 80 mile per hour winds caused damage in Monte Alto, not too far away. And here in Harlingen, too, we had some damage. April 28, 29th, that was the full valley squall line from McAllen to Harlingen. The most populated area got hit pretty hard. We're not sure what the total value of dollars was, but probably 10 to 50 million. Could have been worse, but the winds were 80 to 85, and it missed most of our colonias. And this was the bad one in that same year. So we had a busy year in 2023. Laguna Heights deadly tornado. This is where wind resilience comes in. This is where we got to fix things. My next career, by the way, is going into this space. I've been in the agency 40 years, and I'm looking at retirement in 2, but I'm not quitting. Because we had a deadly tornado in Laguna Heights, and do you realize that the man who was killed went into the interior of his building, as he should, based on our warning? He had enough time. Not a lot, but he had enough time. Building collapsed on him, killed him. 6 miles from the beach. 6 miles from the beach. Laguna Heights. Have you been there? You've all driven by it. Does it have to be that way? No. HE double hockey sticks? No. And unfortunately, the state of Texas doesn't have a lot of code regulation beyond the incorporated areas. There's not a lot. The IBHS, the International Business Home Safety organization that's based in South Carolina, said Texas is the worst disaster waiting to happen in the South. Because other states are doing things. Florida did it years ago after Andrew, 1992. Louisiana's picking up the beat. Alabama's really picking up the beat with fortified home. Mississippi's not there yet. There could be some other issues going on in Mississippi. But I just named 3 states that are kind of Gulf states. And we're the biggest and most populous and very prosperous. So we need to get engaged with that. I understand Texas politics. I get it. But we want to protect people in the rural areas and the suburban, exurban areas too. And May 8, 2025, the North McAllen microburst, that was in the city limits. Again, poorly built structures. Not worst built, but generally poorly built. Had damage they didn't really have to have at winds in Category 1 strength from a thunderstorm event. And this is not clicking for me. There we go. So how do you fix windstorm and build resilience? You check your risks through load path. Any engineers in the room who've done wind or civil engineering, architectural engineering? Anybody? Y'all probably know about this if you haven't seen it. There's a lot more online, but if your load path is correct as shown on the right and left, then you will do okay in that building. But if you have any weak links in that, the building will fail at higher winds. And those higher winds may not be more than 95 miles an hour. They might just be 90. And we do get that outside of hurricanes. So check that wind risk. Garage doors, that's a classic. My garage door actually looks like the one on the left. The one on the right obviously was not. Cameron County should have garage doors that look like this in most subdivisions. But I could tell you in Hidalgo, that same neighborhood I surveyed on May 8th last year, the garage on the right was what it looked like over there. They had a tearaway garage, what's not supposed to be. And they had 2 garages, and the wind blew through one, and fortunately didn't cause any more damage, but it had no cross beams. It had nothing like that. And these winds were totally exposed, by the way, no trees or no blockages, and 80 to 85 mile per hour winds blew that garage in. And not the one on the left. And this is interesting. This is from the event on April 28th, 29th. This is a midnight event, by the way, which is why I got the other date in there. But notice the peel back of the Spanish tile roof in a pretty nice neighborhood south of Weslaco. And a masonry fence, if you will, it got blown down too. So again, as your home ages, repairs may need to be needed to withstand lower wind speeds. Your home may be rated at 120, like mine, but it doesn't mean it's going to stay 120 if you haven't done the repairs after so many years in it. I mean, our climate here is pretty rough and it starts to wear things down. So check your risk. Risk is everything. If you decrease your risk, you increase your resilience, or it should be the other way around, right? But if you don't fix your resilience, you're going to be at higher risk from impact. There's your windstorm requirements from TDI. So here in Cameron County, we are required to have TDI, but again, it doesn't necessarily be uniform between urban, suburban, and rural. We need to really make sure we do that across the board because of what can happen and all the growth that we're seeing here. Any questions on windstorm resilience? Going once, going twice, gone. All right, heat and drought. Heat and drought. Heat is building across the lower valley. Did you know that? Anyone think it feels, any long timers here have been here for 40, 50, 60 years? Give me a show of hands. Is it hotter than it used to be 40, 50, 60 years ago? I see a yes, a definitely, she says. Anybody else? Yes, yes, yes. Yeah, heat's building. This is one of the hottest places when you combine temperature and humidity across the calendar year in the USA, the lower Rio Grande Valley. But we're seeing hotter days and warmer nights. And what's that leading to? Increased evaporation and lower soil moisture retention. We're going to get to why that matters. That's our third big. Yeah, it certainly applies here. And this leads to rapid onset drought, which impacts our $1+ billion agriculture industry. How many people know about the sugar mill? What happened to the sugar mill? Why did the sugar mill close? Anybody know why?
Lack of water. Drought.
Lack of water.
Correct. But you might have heard on the news that it was Mexico's deliveries that caused it. Okay, a little bit. That's why. Increased evaporation, lower soil moisture retention. I'm going to show you the numbers that are going to stagger you in a minute. And by the way, it's not just about ag. It's about your communities too. So if the lack of a reliable water source, water scarcity means trouble for communities too. Did you know that 90% of our water, well, up to 90%, comes from the Rio Grande and through the reservoir systems that are international and Mexican? That's interesting. That's very unique in places I've worked. We didn't have that situation elsewhere, but it really matters here. So Texas is a state of perpetual drought. And I want to point these statements out here. I don't think they're in the room, but they are very important agricultural partners that we work with. On the left, it's Benny Cano, USDA FSA, Farm Service Extension Agent, over in Edinburgh. On the right, it's Dante Galeazzi, who's the TIPA, Texas International Produce Association president. And what's interesting about these data and these quotes are that we had a storm called Tropical Storm Alberto in June 2024. And while the center made landfall near Tampico, we had some good rain. We had about 6 to 8, 6 to 9 inches of rain across a good part of the valley. And then it rained in July, above average rainfall in July, and that's all good. But by the time we got to mid to late August, it started looking like that. And they're saying things like no soil moisture to speak of, and drying up quicker now, a month since our last rain, things are burning up. Really? We had above average rainfall in June and July 2024, and by the end of August, things are burning up. Why? Why are they burning up in just 1 month after good rain? The heat, but think of the long term. What's going on in the long term? I mentioned it before. Evaporation. It doesn't go away in a day. So the soil moisture is like a sponge, sucks it up and doesn't use it. If it rains too hard too quickly, that all runs off anyway. So now you've got a combination of some runoff and low evaporation, which means that your crops are starting to burn up in just a month's time after decent rain. That's new. I can tell you what, that's relatively new. But the drought can be broken by the occasional devastating flood. So it's two prongs we need to invest in. We need to invest, obviously, in drainage for flooding, because we just saw it in March. But we need to invest in the water resource management. We'll get to that momentarily. So here's your temperature trends. This is the scary chart. This goes back to a period of record 1895 in the lower valley. And when you get to 1975, You kind of see even Steven, maybe a little dip there in the 70s, but look what happens as you get into the 80s and beyond. That green line is exponentially rising. So here's a quiz question. The 3 hottest years in the lower Rio Grande Valley are, answer for me. 3 hottest years on record back to the 1890s, 1900 time frame. Anyone want to hazard a guess? The last 3. Who's got a candy bar? Give that man a candy bar. The last 3. You can kind of see it on there if you're looking really close, but if you're not looking that closely, that is correct, the last 3. And here's some interesting stats. The period of late summer to early winter was the hottest on record in 2025. That beat out the hottest on record in 2024. That beat out the hottest on record in 2023. You all think we got an evaporation problem? Please nod your head. We do. It doesn't seem to be changing any. Now, this is the more telling statistic right here. So January, December 2025, that's the year of 2025. We just got December's data in yesterday. Was the 3rd warmest on record, and the warmest since 2024, which I believe was number 2. But the years, the 18 months, which is a year and a half all the way to 5 years, is the warmest on record to date for that period. And it's the warmest since we looked at 2019 to 2024, 2018 to 2023, right? It just keeps on overlapping each other, and that's not good. You're going back over 100 years, right? 120 plus years in some cases. Precipitation, on the other hand, doesn't show too much variability. That same curve, it's called the lowest curve, is shown here, and you can see that it rises and falls kind of equivalently. There's been a little bit of a rise in the overall number going all the way back to the 1890s, but very little relative to the big picture. But you see the spikes and the valleys, the mountains and valleys there of rainfall, and that's pretty common, right? Some years are going to be wet, some years are going to be dry. So we can't make too many heads from tails from the precipitation variability. What we can say, however, is that individual events are being fed by latent heat of condensation, fed by record warm water temperatures in the Gulf and Caribbean, right? So when it rains, it pours. And when it pours and pours, it floods. And we're seeing more of that. 2018, 2019, 2020, 2021, 2025. Not every year, but a lot of years. 1 in 100 plus events. No longer is it the same 100, quote, year. That's why. But water resource issues are likely to continue. So when it's not raining, it's certainly been pretty warm to hot. And there's our reservoir levels in the shaded area on the lower right back to 2023. And these are near record or record lows. The latest value, this is the Amistad minus Falcon percent of conservation capacity provided by the IBWC, the Boundary Water Commission. Still near record lows in early 2026. And notice that the Mexican share has dropped off the chart. It's like 4.9%. Which is ranked with some of the lowest that they've had to deal with on record, or at least back to 1996. It's a long time. But the U.S. values nudged upward a little bit, but still look at the blue line, it's way down there. So the combination is still at or near record lows, and it's been there for a while. What does that mean? What does that mean for distribution of water down the reservoirs? What does that mean for inflow into the Mexican reservoirs that feed ours, in the Mexican tributaries? Is there a lot of water to feed? Yes or no? Not really. There was one year where there was some, and that caused some political kerfuffle, and I understand that, 2022. But even then, it would not have gotten to the level we need to meet the delivery requirements from the treaty. So let's talk about the reservoirs. These are the values that feed into Amistad via the Rio Conchos, which is really important because the Rio Conchos river basin in Mexico has reservoirs along it as well. But the lack of persistent tropical rains have kept their water levels down too. So Boquilla is an important one. It has 2,847,000 cubic meters in storage as maximum, and it's leveled off since October 1st, and it's only sitting on 38% total conservation. Mexico needs their water too, so they're not going to give up much if they don't have much to give themselves. For Francisco I. Madero, that's also on the Conchos, it's the second highest TCM. They're level out at 69%. When I mean level, it means that they are flat. You can see since October, they've been pretty flat. Luis Leon is also on the Conchos, but only 284 TCM, which is still a good number, but nowhere near what Boquilla offers. and they're level at 43, and San Gabriel is at 245. And these are important reservoirs because their releases can go downstream, and the Rio Conchos will feed into Amistad, which then could be released to feed down the Rio Grande into Falcon. But if there's not a lot of water to give, we're not going to get all that much water out of the reservoirs, and that's kind of where we stand. So this is Falcon, where most of our water delivery comes from. And in 2025, the highest value was 13.3% in February last year. And it rose and fell, but mostly fell all the way down to 9.6% in early November. And then releases out of Amistad coming to Falcon has raised it back to a whopping 12.3% as of yesterday. So that's where we're at, all below 13. A long, long way to go. As I said before, hoping for a tropical cyclone is not a water management strategy. So here's minute 331. So minute 331 was addendum to the 1944 water treaty. As you see, 1944 is getting pretty long in the tooth. But it allows some water to be distributed through the Rio Grande from the Rio San Juan. And these are the Rio San Juan Basin and the Alamo Basin. The Alamo is very small. It doesn't really count for giving us the necessary water. But again, not a substitute for water controlled by the treaty, as Mexico must agree to the distribution. It's their water, first and foremost. And they are agreeing to some distribution, but levels are currently 68 and 93, but part of that 68 at Cuchillo, which is about, I think, 150 miles southwest of Marte Gomez, which is near Starr County, is because they've released it into Marte Gomez. And Marte Gomez has released, but no one's sure exactly who's taking it. We know the U.S. is probably taking some, but Mexico is probably taking some in Tamaulipas as well. Bottom line is we need our water in the reservoirs that are governed by the 1944 treaty more than anything, but we're not getting it. And again, hope is not a solution. So there's the sugar mill casualty. There was some political blame put on Mexico, but as we have seen in these slides that I have shown you, if there ain't water, right? And so we got to look at something I like to call the 5 Asians. 5 Asians. Water is life, right? Now, I went to a big meeting that had a lot of elected officials and others over in FAR. I think it was in FAR, back in 2024. Great meeting, by the way. It got into this discussion. So, time for quiz. I wish I had some candy, but I don't. What are the 5 Asians? Let's see if y'all can answer these questions. And raise a hand and shout out the answer, or if we need a mic, we'll get the mic over to you. So what's one of the 5 Asians of water resource management? And water is life. One is really obvious, but the others should be pretty good too.
Not all of you at the same time.
This is a smart group. I know you're going to get some of these. So the Asian means the word ends in Asian.
The mayor said conservation.
Conservation, number 1 answer. So let's do it. Conservation, from drainage sealing to home business water use. This is number 1. Recent article showed Juan Chuy Hinojosa over in Hidalgo County finding some solutions to spend over $100 million to do sealing of canals and improving of reduction of evaporation. That's helpful, better than nothing. So conservation. We got 4 more Asians. What are they? Back here.
Diversification.
What?
Diversification.
Diversification. Okay, great. So I'm going to call that part of the 5 Asians because the 5 Asians are diversification. Good. I like that. It's a new one. So let's put that on hold and let's talk about the other Asians that actually combine to create diversification. Somebody else. Or the same person who may have an idea of another Asian.
Mitigation?
Mitigation. That's what the 5 Asians are kind of on the whole, is mitigation.
Reclamation.
Reclamation. Winner, winner, chicken dinner. I think that's my second one. You are awesome because you got them in order, so have extra cookies and candies. We got it for you. Reclamation. We've seen the proliferation, another Asian, of car washes. Boy, I hope they're recycling that water, reclaiming it, because if they're not, it's just going where? Into the drains and into the Gulf. Not good. If you've heard of Commissioner David Fuentes of Hidalgo County, they're working on a project with the Delta District where they're doing potable water reclamation, and they finally got funded to do more of it. Now, reclamation doesn't mean it has to be potable. For home irrigation, you don't need potable water. You just need water good enough to water your plants. I had it in Florida, $10 a pipe. $10 a pipe. My water bill for my city water was whatever I use for city water, but my irrigation water was like unlimited because they had all the pipes in place for all the new subdivisions. We need that here. So reclamation, okay, what's a third one? Desalination. Winter, take a, this brownie's a good man. Take one. Desal, number 3. You guys are getting them in order too, which is pretty amazing. That's really good because I have different orders. So purify the brackish groundwater and the salt water. Salt water could be really expensive though, but it's worth a try. I think there's some projects that may be getting going that way, but I know that the brackish groundwater is certainly an option. We have to be careful doing that, but it is an option. I have it third because there's other first ones are really, I think, lower hanging fruit than desal. But desal is part of the solution, part of the diversification, by the way. Okay, we got 3, got 2 more. The 5th one may be hard to get, but the 4th one should be able to get
Irrigation?
it. Irrigation. Winner, chicken dinner. Irrigation techniques. Why flood the field when there's a smarter way? And back in the day, they used to flood the field for citrus. Where's that going now if you flood the field? What's happening to all that water in March and April? It evaporates, exactly, because we've had these really warm and hot years. It just goes away. It's not retained by the soil. So you've gotten 4, and those are really kind of the big 4 diversification Asians, right? There's one more, though, and think about what this one might be. I'll give you a hint. It's kind of the unknowns or maybe known unknowns that are out there we haven't thought about regarding these 4. But it ends in the letters Asian. Y'all did good, though. You got the 4. Starts with an I.
Surely not immigration.
No, it's not immigration. I'm not going down that rabbit hole. No, sir. I think he may have said it. Innovation, absolutely. Think about Israel. Think about the Arabian Peninsula. And I know they had oil money there, but look at Emirates, Abu Dhabi, Dubai. They got beautiful places with green grass and stuff, and yet they're finding ways to use water because there's no water there, but they're figuring it out. I don't know exactly what they're doing. Singapore, I do. Singapore, they have these really neat reclamation projects there that basically say Singapore Island with, 5 million people, whatever it is, all in a small area. It doesn't really get the kind of rainfall they need, are finding ways of innovating to make that happen. And we've also heard of things like rainwater harvesting, which could be an example of an innovation technique, although that's already out there. But that's a way of reclamation. It's another example of reclamation. So don't forget about the 5 Asians. I've actually done interviews on this, and I like to say that Texans can have Texas solutions to make this happen. We don't need to rely on necessarily Mexican water if we figure this out on our own. We have the ability to do it. We have the funds to do it if we know where to spend them. So flooding protection and drought protection is going to be key watchwords as we move into the latter half of this century for your grandchildren as they grow up to be my age now, for example. So very good. 5 Asians. Y'all did great. Now to the forecast. So we'll go through this fairly quickly. There's been a great conversation. Sorry I'm taking up a lot of the time, but I'd like to be interactive, and you're a great group to do it with. Unfortunately, there's our seasonal forecast. Our temperature outlook is a 43% chance of above average temperatures from February through April, and only a 24% chance of below average. So if it were a 3-way election with a plurality, the 43% wins the election and gets the seat. Not good for when we're talking about dryness. For rainfall, it's a 44% chance of below average and just a 23% chance of above average. But again, we could have March again. I mean, I wish I was that good. I would be sitting on a yacht somewhere telling you that on March 31st it's going to rain the buckets. But I can't do that. I'm not that good. No one is. Temperatures, you see them rising and you see the rainfall average. These are the averages that you're comparing it to. When you start looking at the 40+% chances, you're getting into higher confidence. When you see 50+% chances, it's like an election. You know, someone wins these days with 52%, it's a landslide. So if we have 52% on the probability map, which we don't yet, but if we did, that would be high confidence that we're going into solidly above average temperatures for the period. We don't have that yet. Into spring, March, April, and May, it's pretty much the same for temperatures. You see that above area, that's 50+% across El Paso over to the Permian Basin. It's not really a good sign for our reservoirs. More evaporation out there, which is not good. And rainfall chances, they go to equal chances. And there's a number of reasons for that. Some transition in things like the El Nino Southern Oscillation. There's some other uncertainty. And maybe they're looking back at last March and April and saying, we want to be careful if we say below average and they get hammered with rain again. So it's a 33, 33, 33 deal on that. And there's your averages shown. But again, probability of temperature is the same deal as it was for February through April. And now April through June gets you into early summer. Same deal on temperature. And notice something here about precipitation. We're still in equal chances, and we do get more precipitation on average, lower right there, during this period. But look at the East Coast. Look at that above average there. Interesting hurricane season teaser I want to alert you to as we get to the beginning of the season, which always is a wild card, by the way. But now we've gone to 46% chance of above average temperatures in Harlingen, and that means a 20% chance of below. So we've actually lowered the chance of below and increase the confidence of it being pretty toasty again, compared to the 30-year average, by the way. And it's the 30-year average from 1991 to 2020, which is actually the highest 30-year average on record. So I show those data points that show 1895. That's the full period of record, which is why I asked people 40, 50, 60 years ago, how did it feel here? The last 30 years are dominated in some ways by the 10 years from 2011 to 2020, which were by far the moonshots of the hottest on record here in the valley. And I'll give you an interesting stat in a minute on that. So here's summer, and this is troublesome too. We're still sitting on that 47% chance now. We've gone up again above average, so increasing confidence. Equal chances for the rainfall, but notice the East Coast again in the above. Again, this is kind of a hurricane season teaser, and we'll get into that in a minute. So let's bottom line the outlook in relation to the four bigs. Heat is dominant. Another top 10 warmest year is becoming more likely. Man, it would be really scary if 2026 were hotter than 2023, 24, and 25, because those years were close to being off the charts. But we saw that 2025 wasn't too far away from 24, which wasn't too far away from 23. So I don't know. I can say this, January currently ranks in the top 5. Even though we've had some coolest days here, those coolest days are just a little below average. But the first 9 weren't. They were way up there. It felt like, what, October in early January? I was at the beach in the surf. Like, really? I'm almost never in the surf in January down here, but I was. And I'm not from the north anymore. I moved to Florida in 1998, so I'm acclimated to the cold. You get me down to 55 degrees, I'm in a winter coat, you know? It wasn't from when I lived up in the Maryland, Pennsylvania area, by the way. But anyway, water shortages will continue to exacerbate. Remember, without movement on the 5 Asians, there is movement, which is great. We need a lot more movement there. But will it flood again? There's my statement. Texas is a state of perpetual drought broken by the occasional devastating flood. By the way, it's not my statement. It's 100 years old by a weather person. I want to say weatherman. I don't want to say meteorologist. I'm not sure he was. But he made that in the 1920s, saying this is how the state of Texas is. And he was right. And it's really been right in the valley for the last decade. If we do flood, though, the higher chances are typically June, August, and September. That doesn't mean March, April, and May are out of the woods. It just means that the higher chances are then. Oh, and by the way, July is never out of the woods either, as we've seen historically. So here's our hurricane season teaser. El Nino may be returning by the peak of the season. ASO stands for August, September, October. That's the peak of the season. The red bar means a probability of El Nino over 60%, which means it's becoming more and more likely that we go into El Nino. Anybody know what El Nino, forget about what it is, but just what does El Nino typically mean for the Atlantic hurricane season? Anybody want to say bigger, more active?
Just active.
People say active. How many people say about the same as average? Average, by the way, is 14 named, 7 hurricanes. Anyone say average? Anyone think below average? Anybody? Anybody?
Above average.
I see everybody saying above average with El Nino. Well, believe it or not, it's not. It's below average. If we get into an El Nino by the peak of the season, this is the typical El Nino influence for the Atlantic Basin. Now, the basin's a big place. You can see the map there. It's the entire Atlantic Ocean, the Caribbean, the Gulf of Mexico, Gulf of America, Gulf of Mexico. That whole area is under the fewer hurricanes, and then the Pacific is more. But not every El Nino does that. There's other factors that can play in. So you just don't write at home and say 100% confidence it will be a reduced hurricane season in 2026. But the lean will be going there, I suspect. So the forecast number of storms will probably be averaging on the lower end than the higher end. So when the hurricanes, the Climate Prediction Center, along with the Hurricane Center combined, come with their forecast, they're probably looking at 10 to 16. When the May forecast comes out for named storms, then hurricanes would be like 4 to 7, with the top number being the average, and the average for the season being below based on the El Nino coming in. That's what I think is going to happen when we get to the May forecast, but there's still 4 months to figure all this out. Now, here's where it gets interesting. This is the August, September, October seasonal forecast, and I do think that they're building in this latest El Nino forecast, which is now more robust on the likelihood of a La Nina that is weak shifting over to El Nino in just 6 months. And you can see here you have a 55% probability of above average temperatures during the hottest time of the year, or at least part of that. Yikes. And the average, again, 1991 to 2020, which is our highest 30-year average on record, so that's a swelter forecast. But look at the rainfall. It's actually below average across the valley, and highest below average is across the southern plains. If that were to verify, that's a real yikes when it comes to water resource, reservoirs, and all that. Big problems. So we'll see where the trend goes. But El Nino summers here typically are hot and dry. 2009 was a great example of that. That was a moderate El Nino, and we were off the charts hot for July and August that year. And it didn't rain much either. So with that, the lean on this one would be where? Where would the lean be if there's a lean for hurricanes in the 2026 season? Especially the peak, which is August through early October. Would it be Gulf? Would it be Caribbean? Would it be Atlantic? Would it be East Coast? Where would it be from the Atlantic basin, which is the Gulf, Caribbean, and East Coast, and the Atlantic? Anyone think the lean is west? Anyone think there's a western lean based on that forecast? See lots of reds and yellows on that, right? That means below and hot, below average rainfall and hot temperatures. Does that signify a western lean, meaning our area? Anyone say yes? Why?
Well, we get all the hot, all the evaporation coming into our area, and the wind.
What does evaporation mean, folks?
More water in the air.
Less water in the air, actually. Condensation. The evaporation does happen, right? But it condenses in humidity. If your atmosphere is dry, what does the evaporation do? Poof. If you go poof, where's the hurricane going to come from? So the answer is the opposite, sir. Actually, a lean is farther east. What happened in the 2025 season? Where were the hurricanes? Anybody know? Oh, the answer is, where were the hurricanes? Right? But to give the proposition question, where were the hurricanes? In the Atlantic. All of them. Yeah. Except one, Chantal and Barry, my namesake, which may be retired, by the way. We'll see, because of the hill country. But Barry hit as a very weak one-day event near Tampico. And then Melissa was in Jamaica, and we had Chantal in North Carolina, South Carolina. Our total dollar value damage, I think, was in the hundreds of millions. We didn't even get to $1 billion from the hurricanes this year, direct strike. We had none. They were all in the Atlantic. Melissa hit Jamaica. That was our big one. But there were some big ones out there, some real scary ones out there in the ocean. And 4 of them were rapid intensifiers, and that's what we always get scared by. I was at a talk this morning that showed how the Red Cross acts on hurricane preparedness, and they were still using H-120. H-120. Do you think we're going to have 5 days in many hurricane cases to prepare down here? I better hear a lot of no's. I'm going to hear a lot of no's. Not every storm is going to be Hurricane Allen or Hurricane Beulah. Most of them won't be. So anyway, just a thought. So again, peak season, long lead outlooks, it's just hot and dry with the tropical cyclone lean to the east. Could it be Florida? Could it be the Carolinas? Those earlier maps show a hint of that. This one, it could be the Atlantic. That doesn't mean we couldn't get one sneaking through the cracks. Hurricane Harvey snuck through the cracks in 2017. Didn't get us, but boy, Texas felt it. $125 billion. So we don't rule it out. We always prepare as if this is the year that we get the one. But the opportunity may only be for the one versus the 3 or 4. Like we saw in 2024, we had 3 nearby. And with that, there's my information for me. And I will provide another slide here with our office information. So if you need to take a screenshot of that to contact me directly, that's my email. I'm still here a while longer, but I am seeing the light at the end of the retirement tunnel. May not look it, but yeah, that picture, I think I have less gray hair than I do now. And then there's our office contact information. There's our team on the right, and you can reach us for any requests that you may have for weather support by going to that email address. And you can find us on social media at NWS Brownsville, although we do serve the whole valley. So with that, I thank you all for the ability to speak to you and hope you got a lot out of it, and I'll stick around for questions.
Well, I was going to tell you, Barry, nowadays we're in a social media environment. And to add to what the mayor was saying, anytime that we're alerted that we may get some rain, people, understandably, they're expecting the worst. I mean, what happened in March, I think Harlingen was expecting 2 inches of rain. And so now people are scared. And you know, we try to treat every event as if it's going to be something major. We have to. I mean, every time that we get something, we're all talking and we're trying to prepare. And it ends up being a false alarm, but that's something now has become normalized in that we're expecting the worst with every event. Is that going to be something that will continue?
So recency bias is a double-edged sword. I think the events of March are, in a way, a good idea of recency bias because of the perpetual drought broken by the occasional devastating flood. We've been seeing this, and the local leadership and state leadership realize that we need to fund the 2 prongs of water resource management and flood mitigation, right? As long as we keep our eye on those balls at the same time, they say walk and chew gum at the same time, do that, we'll be okay as we move forward. But we can't forget about flooding if we're in drought for 2 years in a row and don't see anything. We can't forget about hurricane preparedness just because 2025 was dead. There still could be a hurricane. Some year there's going to be another one. And those are the 2 of the 4 bigs, right? The windstorm and the flooding rain. So we don't want to forget about windstorm resilience either. We saw what happened in 2023 and even in 2025 in a couple of local areas. That's why I call it the 4 bigs. We need to keep track of all of those and not let recency bias cloud our judgment, because what does recency bias do? It puts you in a stovepipe or a tunnel, and that's human nature. But as people who are involved with community, with emergency management, with preparedness, you need to always have your eyes open on the periphery. Some people have a term, they say, stay in your lane, right? Stay in your lane. Well, these stovepipes and tunnels based on the flooding rain, that's the lane, right? But I always have to say, well, okay, stay in your lane of expertise, but understand how the traffic moves on the other lanes on the highway coming and going. Sure. That way you have a periphery, and you know that things could change and happen. And that's also part of the uncertainty in forecasting, right? Be ready for the reasonable worst case. With the March event, our reasonable worst case 2.5 days out was like 2 inches or 3 inches. It was really low. We didn't even have a number to play with. We had to imagine, what if it comes down to the valley with a 100-mile error? What would happen in this situation? And our staff is not really trained to get their arms around imagining something that's not showing up in the uncertainty data. Even down to 5% probability, it was like 4 to 5 inches, maybe not even that much, 2.5 days out. So how are we going to forecast the big one's coming when the uncertainty is, or the certainty of not getting it is close to 99%. If you false alarm on that too many times, forget about recency bias. You just basically took your credibility from here and took it to the floor. And no one's going to trust you. And we're not in the business of not being trusted. We're in the business of being trusted because we're government officials too. So it's tough because of human nature, but we do the best we can. I mean, we just heard it, from the mayor. She had a great point. The forecast was a bust. But we are working on building the skill set, but that doesn't mean we won't have other busts as well as successes. And sometimes the successes get forgotten because it's easier to remember when the man bites the dog than when the dog bites the man. Okay? So keep that in mind as you're educating your communities on all of these things, that it's still an uncertain science, but we're getting better and better at it. And that's why we're here and getting paid the way we do, to help improve the ability to forecast these things for decision support to improve public safety, which is actually where we were reimagined, if you will, in the federal government as a public safety agency. That means like Homeland Security, law enforcement, firefighting, all that, we're in there. And it's true, that's what we do. So we want to get it right. Believe me, when that event happened, it was like the jaw drops, and I'm like, oh no. You know, we knew on the 26th it was getting closer, and it was like, uh-oh. And then on the 27th, it was like flying by the seat of your pants. And Tom remembers, and Hidalgo County remembers, the city of McAllen remembers, and I'm on the phone, and I'm basically doing multiple briefings, and I'm saying, okay, it's here, guys. You know, this is where we're going. Move those vehicles eastbound because it's going to Harlingen. It's going to get really bad over there. And luckily, they had some vehicles to move, but at that point, it was too late to go back and cry over it. You have to just ride it. And then the after action is when you come up and you say, okay, what could have been better? And what could have been better is the fact that we're working on getting it better. I'm a straight shooter. I know that was a busted forecast, but the honest truth is that we were getting closer than we were, say, 10, 20 years ago, but that's not good enough yet. We need to get good enough, and we're working on it. So I hope everyone is patient and still trustworthy of us. We'll do the best we can. I mean, obviously, if we see something among our staff that they're missing something they shouldn't miss, we'll be all over it. I'm on the management team. We look at that because that could be a bigger deal, but that wasn't the case here. We turned it around as best as we could starting on March 26th, but we didn't have the data we needed on March 25th, to be honest, to be able to say we're getting highly confident in a historic amount of rainfall. I mean, you got to be real careful with that kind of stuff. The best example of that I've seen that really worked wonders was Harvey, okay? Harvey's forecast was excellent, but yet I do still hear, as the Hurricane Center does its usual clock turning. What I mean by clock turning is they're not going to windshield wipe a forecast on a track when it's nothing there, when the storm is degenerated. So the initial forecast, you probably heard this 3 days out, 3.5 days out. One of them was coming right here as a tropical storm, but it freaked people out, like, uh-oh, that's going to be ours. And I keep hearing that. And I keep telling people, well, the Hurricane Center does not windshield wipe. So they were slowly moving it closer to the ultimate location, which they nailed, by the way, of Rockport. But it had to go through us to get to them in terms of the forecast accuracy. But 2 days out, on August 23rd, I think is the date, 25th, the forecast was only 10 miles off from where it went east of South Padre. That's how good the forecast was. And what did that allow? That allowed the coastal bend to be prepared 48 to 60 hours out without having the luxury of 120. They didn't have that, but they had 48 to 60 for rapid intensification potential. At that point, it was only forecast to be a tropical storm, but they had it in the wording that this could be stronger and could rapidly intensify, so it may be a hurricane at landfall 2 days out. And then within 1 day, it was like, oh no, it's going to be at least a Category 3. So they had some window there to work with. But the rainfall forecast, there was wording that said unprecedented historic rainfall, catastrophic flooding in Houston, Galveston. I think that came out on August 25th, 2 days before what happened in the Houston, Galveston area. Why did that matter? Well, the mayor, in very good infinite wisdom, decided not to evacuate the city of Houston. Best move made. And some people said, why not? They should have all gotten out. Does anybody remember Hurricane Rita in 2005? What happened with Hurricane Rita, Houston, Galveston? What happened on I-45? How many people died on I-45? 10. Now imagine if people have a Rita reaction to Harvey and the mayor and others say, get out now, even though the forecast is for a tropical storm with flooding rain, not wind, and not a lot of storm surge either. The answer was, don't leave, because if you clog the highways and you get 50 inches of rainfall, did you see how much water? I mean, we're talking a rainfall event that's not even in the atlas. So like a 1 in 1,000 plus event, which means at minimum you got 3 to 4 feet of water in a lot of areas. Imagine having the Houston traffic caught on that. How many people would survive it? Certainly not only 36 dead or whatever. It was, people died, unfortunately, but a lot fewer than 1,000. So good move. Those are the moves that we want to see made by officials based on the forecast that we're issuing. What are the 4 bigs are we focusing on? In hurricanes, what are the big 4? Are we focusing on surge? Yes, get people off the islands. Are we focusing on rainfall flooding in an urban area? Find higher ground. Get to a place you can get to in the city. It's higher ground. If you can get out sooner, do it, but don't cause a mandatory evacuation because everyone will panic like in 2005. If it's windstorm, we're looking at category 4 or 5 winds over a place like Houston, Galveston. That's an uh-oh. That is an uh-oh. That's kind of a sum of all fears event because now you are looking at a lot of impact on people that could kill. We hope that never happens, but we have to be ready for it. So that's what we're here to do, try to provide that support and focus on the weather events and what they're going to make for impact so that people can make a good decision to get people to safety. And with that, I'll pass.
Anybody have any comments they'd like to make? I know we have TxDOT, county, school district, irrigation district, drainage districts, city of Harlingen, La Feria, San Benito, commissioners.
If I remember correctly, you said 10-year forecast. This is going to stay within the 10-year. This dryness and weather events, you don't foresee anything majorly changing in 10 years?
So NOAA has done studies, not this year, of course, but in recent years on looking down the pike at how global warming will impact the Southwest, the Southern U.S., the Great Plains, Midwest, East Coast. And the areas of better rainfall, where there will be more flooding more frequently with warming, are like the Ohio Valley, the Northeast, part of the lower Midwest, the lower Ohio Valley. The Southwest U.S., which actually included Texas and the Southern Plains out to the west, so the drier side of things as it gets warmer. And so it's not a good scene when you look at our population increasing on both sides of our border here. That's where the 5 Asians come in. So the answer is yes, 10, 20, 30 years, that is the trend. That does not mean every year will be number 1, 2, or 3. I guarantee you there'll be some years that rank in the top 12 and top 15. But here's a stat that you all may not know. City of Brownsville, we've been keeping records there since 1878. And the top 10 warmest years have all occurred since 2011. And the last 3 years are the top 3 on record going back to 1878. And we do look at some of the data we use, and it does make me think about it a little bit, so I always compare with other locations. McAllen is now, I think, 9 of the top 10 warmest years since 2011, and 10 since 2009. And when you look at a location like Harlingen right here, where we have an observation point that uses traditional measurements of temperature that you would do with your backyard thermometer that's calibrated, right? I think Harlingen's up to 7 of 10 warmest years since 2011. So Rio Grande City is another site like that, where they use more traditional rather than the automated sensors that we use now. And again, I have some issues with the automated sensors, I'll be honest, but they do calibrate, and we calibrate them to be accurate. But it doesn't mean I trust them 100%, but I trust the backyard observer who's getting calibrated by us as well, which is your standard near-the-ground readings. And Rio Grande City, I think, is 7 or 8 of the, I think it's 5 to 7 of the last 10. 5 to 7 of the 10 warmest years occurred since 2011. So it's the entire valley is seeing the trend. And that's where that National Center for Environmental Information, they fold in all the observing points to come up with that chart that you saw. And it's a pretty scary thing, and it doesn't seem to show any signs of slowing, which scares me. In 2026, we're off to a jackrabbit start. And the forecast there implies another top 10. And that goes back to, again, 1895, 1900, in Brownsville's case, 1878. Harlingen, by the way, 1912. So I don't look at 30-year averages as much as I look at periods of record. And that's where the trends come in. That's why those charts matter. So, yes, it looks like it will continue. We're pretty confident of that.
How long have you been doing this?
The weather business, 40 years.
Okay.
Yeah. The climate business, the social impacts business, all of that, I would say 2005, 6, so 20 years on that side.
I know we have members of the public here, and we have a lot of government officials from the various entities. We want to assure everybody that the people you see here are not strangers. We all communicate regularly, and we all work very closely. And we want to assure the general public that when we're preparing for events, we're all communicating, and we're all holding hands. And that is something that it's important that everybody be aware of. The county, cities, irrigation districts, drainage district, we're all working together. We all have the same goal. We're all helping each other, and we have each other's backs. And so it's important to note. I know we've been here an hour and a half, and we truly appreciate Barry being here. Thank you for being here. Let's give him a hand. And what we want to do, in the interest of time, we'll schedule a next event, and so we can continue talking, continue the dialogue. And unless anybody has any questions, we can conclude this first meeting. And we want to assure you this is just the beginning in our efforts to be proactive and to work together. Thank you for joining us.
Thank you.